Hi, and welcome to Sustainability Smart Talks. I'm your host, AJ Makarapa. And today, I'm joined by my guest, Naylor, an entrepreneur in mattresses.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, of course it is.
Thanks for having me. So, do you want me to give you a bit of a background on where I've come from,
Yes,
AJ?
please, and thank you.
I mean, so for everybody listening, look, AJ and I met each other on the Loughborough University Incubator Programme. So we both joined the programme to learn how to be sort of entrepreneurs. We want to make money, but we want to make money responsibly, and that's how we sort of met eye to eye. And so we've become good friends, and we refer to each other as brothers from another mother, because you can clearly see that we're very similar looking.
That's very well twins, in fact.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, Richard, they say that one of the best performing enhancing drugs is sleep.
Yes.
So how did you get into the journey of being into...
That's a good question. So a long time ago, too many years that I care to mention, I did my undergrad degree, and at the time that was in real estate surveying, and I couldn't get a job because the market was so poor for graduates at that point that I decided to work in my local furniture factory to pay for my overdraft from being a student and all that good stuff. And I never left that industry. So, and about 2 or 3 years later, I joined a bed company, and it all started there.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that journey into sustainability, how you...
Right, so I started my career in sales, and as that progressed, I got into key account management. And part of key account management is you're not just doing sales, you're doing everything. You're doing marketing, you're doing product design, you're working with the factories and so on and so forth. But you're also listening to your key stakeholders, your customers and the consumers. So your design for products suddenly, you know, if you're dealing in the UK with John Lewis or Marks and Spencer's, I mean, if anybody listening is familiar with Marks and Spencer's, they have a Plan A program, which is about sustainability because there is no Plan B, you know, right? So you start thinking about how you make your products, the environment you're making them in, the materials you're making them from, and that became very interesting to me. So over the years, I've tried to be more and more sustainable in my thinking when putting products together, but I wanted to learn more. I wanted to look left and right. I knew what I knew about materials, but I didn't know about the bigger picture of sustainability, which is sort of growing all the time, isn't it? So I took myself off to university, having not been there for 25 years or so. It was a little bit daunting. I went to Cranfield University and did a master's in sustainability, which was a combined apprenticeship course. So you also, while you were working, you put your business practice into that degree at the time. So it's called a sustainability business specialist apprenticeship with MSc. So you got both qualifications. And so I graduated top of the class in that there, which was pretty good for an old geezer. And the university said to me, Richard, really like your thinking on some of these things. Would you like to apply for some grant funding to develop your ideas further? And that was called Future Frontiers Fund. It's aimed at businesses that want to impact future generations positively. And so I applied for that funding, got that funding, and here we are today with me leaving the mattress industry to start my own bed business, but starting it in a way that is different to the rest of the industry. And maybe I can come on to that a bit later.
So what trend did you see, though, when you decided to get into the mattress industry?
Well, I joined the mattress industry, let's say 20 years ago, and it was, I think a lot of what we were doing was about producing a product. Yes, it needed to be comfortable. I mean, when you're making a product that has a primary function, mattresses are, if you're a consumer, you want to buy a mattress that's comfortable, it's hygienic, it's durable, all of those good things. But the thinking on those products at the time was not about the material input. It was just about primary function. It was just about satisfying those primary needs for the consumer. And there was no real thought about end of life, the materials that we were using, and so on and so forth. That's 20 years ago. Now, if I take that now and look at maybe the last 5 to 10 years, there's been much more effort and consideration into the types of materials that we employ. Doesn't mean the industry is doing it well, but we're certainly thinking about it. Okay. And I think my frustration has always been, how can I do this better? Okay. And that's where it led to my input. And certainly when I've done some research, I think we were talking about it before we turned the cameras on, about the history of mattress design.
Yes, indeed. So you're now working in creating circular system design for furniture.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean?
Good question. So I think there's lots of confusion as well. You know, these terms are used quite loosely in any industry, aren't they? Hey, we're circular and stuff like that. And I think, you know, true circularity is yet to be achieved in a lot of marketplaces, I would say. So for me, what I've done is rethought how mattresses come together. So this stemmed back on, you know, to understand that better, I think Winston Churchill said, you know, we need to learn from our past. You know, we need to look at history and learn from our past. And so for me, I went to say, let's see what we've been doing for the last 200,000 years. Okay, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But I wanted to tell you this other quote about Stephen Hawking said about history. And Professor Stephen Hawking said, I think his quote was something along the lines of, history is mainly the history of stupidity. Okay, so we've got to learn from that because we've made loads of mistakes, haven't we, as a species. And so when I went to look at the mattress history, so where do you go? Where do you learn about what we've been doing in the Anthropocene on mattresses? So, you know, the first sort of reports I could sort of find were archaeological digs in South Africa, actually, in caves in I can't remember the exact area in South Africa, but anyway, there were caves. There was 2 digs actually in the 2000s, sort of the last one in 2011. But they discovered, you know, what would appear to be bedding, mattress bedding, inside caves that were dated. The first dig was around 75,000 years ago, and the second one was 200,000 years ago. And what they found were these layers of stacks of vegetation. Periodically, ancient man would burn those layers clearly, and the hypothesis was they're burning it because they wanted to clean it every so often, because these things would use them, and then there would be mites and, you know, infestations and things like that. They'd burn it to clean it, then restack, and then you've got all this sort of layers of archaeology that appeared. And there was also evidence in the layers that they were using plants, as we do today, to deter insects. So those insect deterring plants, and we use citronella, don't we, and things like that when we want to get rid of mosquitoes. And they were doing very, very similar things. So that was one of the early examples of man using plants and the use of medicine, essentially, to get a health benefit. So what we saw with early man was comfort. They're making layers. They've got hygiene in their thinking, and they were creating more and more layers for making it more durable and stuff like that. So all of these things that we value today, early man was already doing in its own way. And then we looked at history through digs in Egypt, through, you know, Tutankhamun's tomb. He had, you know, very elaborate beds that were constructed. They would have been used with lots of feather bolsters and things like that. Into Pompeii, where you've got, you know, a whole city frozen in ash, and the archaeological digs there found lots of different evidence of the types of bedding and things used. All the way through to literature and paintings. Art is a big reference for understanding what's happened with mattresses and how people slept over time. Museum pieces. And so you get to this picture where you're using art and research to find sort of evidence of how our predecessors slept and how they used beds. And then coming into the 20th century, we use adverts and things like that, because adverts, I mean, not only adverts are fantastic to look at, but they showed us this sort of post-industrial revolution period where we have factories now, we have manufacturing, we're advertising our products out to the masses and supplying them, rather than doing it on a more one-to-one village type basis. This was now the era of mass production. Yes, and what it told me, AJ, was that mattresses, yes, material input has changed quite a lot in mattresses over that time, from natural fillings to synthetics have dominated the space. But the way we put a mattress together, i.e., you know, sort of having this cloth bag that's sewn together and stuffed with fillings, whether it's straw or foam, it hasn't really changed. In that design thinking, it's a very linear product. And I would argue that mattresses are designed to fail. It's planned obsolescence, if you like. So what can we do to change that thinking?
Yes, indeed, because mattresses are difficult to recycle. I think they're about 55 million that I per year.
Yeah, good number. You're nearly spot on. So for my own research, and you know, this is looking at all the sort of international bedding organisations, from the American version, the European version, our own one here in the UK. And what I could surmise from my MSc thesis was around about 55 million mattresses are disposed of globally per year. And you think, gosh, and the big bulky items, right? So how big is that? So I started to sort of say, well, look at the average size of a mattress. What does that equate to in volume terms? And then try and get this as a visual picture of what that means. And I worked out that it could be 25 Great Pyramids of Giza in size. And actually, when I looked at a more relevant one, it was sort of like, over 200 versions of the Buckingham Palace, in terms of size and mass. And you imagine that just dumped. And that, those mattresses, it's the same, the populations of Spain and Portugal have roughly the same sort of population. So it's every one of those people each year dumping a mattress. Now, the problem with that is we're not very good at recycling them.
Exactly. So how would you ensure that people, once at the end of life of the product, they do recycle them? What can we do as an awareness so that...
Well, it depends where you are in the world, I think. So in more developed countries, there are, very established waste systems. But the waste systems have established to deal with products that are constructed in a linear format, if that makes sense. They're not really designed for circularity as such, although we are getting better at those things. If I take a mattress in the UK, there are various disposal methods. You can buy a new mattress and the retailer will take it away for you and they will dispose of it for you. It really depends on where it goes from that point, because if you're the consumer, do you choose your waste disposal responsibly? Do you understand where it's going? And I think most people just want to dispose of it correctly, i.e. not dump it in the countryside, but they want to send it somewhere. And so in the UK, we'll have the local council systems will collect your mattresses, they will stow them, then they will either have a contract to send them to landfill or incineration, or they could have a contract to send them to a recycling centre. However, in the UK, we recycle about 14% of mattresses. If you take North America, the largest market in the world, it's less than 5% of mattresses are recycled. So these are very small numbers, and part of it is because they're quite hard to deconstruct and so on and so forth. Europe has similar numbers. When you get to Asia and other places, then those numbers are just not even recognisable from a recycling perspective. It tends to be open dumps, open incineration. In this country, it's still landfill and organised incineration, but it's a different methodology. So we're very poor as a global species of disposing of these types of bulky items. And just use mattresses as an example. We've got lots of other products that we consume quite regularly, and we're not very good at recycling them.
Listen, in any shape or form. When you talk to directors, finances, or stakeholders, how would you frame sustainability to them?
Well, I think there's an idealistic view for sustainability, isn't there? Is that there's a stand on your soapbox and say we must do this for the good of the planet, regardless of cost. But that's idealistic and not realistic. I think we have lots of challenges geopolitically, and I mean that, and by that I mean countries coming together to solve sustainability issues is a lot more challenging than we need it to be. We have good organisations like the UN that are doing their bit, but when it comes to actions, I think most nations have a lot of self-interest rather than a global interest. So there are challenges there. So the ability for business to be agents of change is fantastic. Now, because we sell our products to consumers globally, so if this business, my business, wants to make a sustainable product and we make it and we do that really thoughtfully, we can make an impact, right? And if other businesses do it, we can make much more impact. So how do we get those stakeholders around the table to agree to doing that? I think, coming back to the question, and I think we still live in a world of profit and loss. We live in a world of GDP. And I believe the best way to do that is to be a business that is not only profitable, but ultimately responsible. And that's how we're going to get it. So a financial lens over what we're doing to sell it to the stakeholders in the business is probably the best way to handle that in the world that we're in today.
Of course. I just wanted to ask, because bring it back now to your earlier works. Talk about traceability and how you've worked with that before.
So in the mattress world, when we evolved to sort of thinking about material input into a product as opposed to the end of life recycling. But it was a start, right? We're on a journey into sustainability. So we think, well, what can we do to our products that really sort of impact all of the pillars of sustainability, whether it's economic, environmental, or social. So how do we do that? So in previous businesses, I looked at, and I was supplying the John Lewis Partnership at the time. And working with the John Lewis Partnership, we realised that we could harness all the wool from their Waitrose business. So the John Lewis and the Waitrose businesses are one business overall. And take the wool from the farms that they employed for their Waitrose business, the lamb meat and so on. We could take the wool from that part of it and put it into the mattresses and sell it in the mattresses, which was seen as a really positive thing to do at the time. So, and in doing that, we could also put together a formal traceability system. So we ended up working with the Red Tractor Farm Assurance in setting up traceability, full chain of custody, all audited from the farms, going all the way through that. So we took all the byproducts of that production and made it into a product that was also sold into John Lewis. Not only that, but the next stage of that journey would be to then recover that wool at end of life, and then in some format compost it, but it can't stop there. That composted material then needs to go back to the farm, onto the land, to grow more grass and more food for the sheep, so that it can continue sequestering carbon to grow more wool, and that becomes a more natural cycle of sustainability. And that was really successful. So in the UK, it's a big deal to win an award from the Grocer, which is the sort of the trade magazine for the supermarket and grocery business. It's called the Grocer, and they do a number of glossy awards, and one of them is a sustainability award. And Waitrose and John Lewis won a gold award for that program, which I was happy to be involved with.
Okay, so what I can see is that during the value chain, if businesses invest into being sustainable, we can get off the fact that most nations are selfish and avoid the political situation. So when you talk to other businesses, how would you sell sustainability to them then, to make sure that they are sustainable within that value chain? I
think so. From my experience in the past, it's not about sort of, you don't want to damage yourself financially as a business, because your business needs to be sustainable, right? There's the economic pillar. If your business goes bust, then your supply chains are in trouble, and so on and so forth. So we have to remind ourselves, and it's not wrong to talk about profit, but it's about talking about responsibly derived profit, okay? And how do you evolve your business to that way of thinking? And I think part of the justification for doing that is saying, well, I've got this new material, it's very unique, we've gone to all of this trouble to make sure it's farmed properly in the first place, that all of the animal husbandry and so on and so forth is in place, everybody in the supply chain's paid correctly, and all of the things that come around doing things correctly, ethically and morally right. We've put all those things together, but it does come at a cost. But it's a great marketing story. You get a whole chain of custody back to the happy farmer. And the consumer these days is really big on provenance and stuff like that. So, to do that, it costs a bit more, but we can charge a bit more for that unique. So it was great. So if you can say, actually, I can charge a bit more, and actually I can get more margin out of that for my business, but I'm supplying a really good value-added product, then your average selling price can go up, and so do your margins and your turnover and so on and so forth. So actually, if you think about it from not just it's going to cost me more money, think about how you market it, how you exploit that benefit for your business to create more value.
I agree with that, because one of the UN Sustainability Development Goals, the last one is partnerships.
That's right. UN SDG, as they to anachronize it, is number 17 is the partnerships one, and it can mean different things, but I think it's really useful to think about how you can use your various stakeholders to partner together to create more value from a sustainability perspective in across the entire value chain. And in the instance of mattresses and things like that, once you start looking at, hey, I've done that with wool and I've gone back to the farm, what if I can use some really unique fibres? And then I started looking at things like bananas, pineapple fibres. These are all vegetable fibres. They all sequester carbon, and actually they're a byproduct of food. So when you look at all the large banana plantations across the globe, and we love, as a species, we love eating bananas, but the fruit is only a small part of that plant. As the same with pineapple, it's only a small part of what has loads and loads of useful cellulose and other bits that are around there that can be recovered and turned into fibre. And what happens on a lot of plantations is they will almost employ a slash and burn type scenario where they'll chop the plantation down. It's burnt locally, which causes lots of not only environmental pollution to the global atmosphere, but if you think about the local populations that live and work in that area, they've got to spend a month of the year, covered in smog and smoke.
So I agree with
it's
that.
just a nonsense. So we have an abundance of natural resource out there, and I think it's incumbent on businesses to look left and right and see what the opportunity is. Don't just rely on your current supply chains. Look at what you can do to innovate and bring more value to your business.
So I agree with that. Well, you've just applied to the British standards now for circular design and furniture. Let's talk about that.
Well, it's by no means set. That I'll just make that clear, but. There is lots more focus within industry and standards on circularity and design for circularity. So the British standards are introducing one. It's not quite there yet, and hopefully I may be involved in that. But if you look at Europe, for example, Europe have just introduced the EU product design regulations, which basically means certain problem categories of consumer product have to think about circularity in design, repairability, on all of these things with it. It's become law, okay? And that's a good thing from my opinion, because, if you take the car industry, when you say, well, if you make it voluntary, then it's really up to the individual businesses to do that. And I think the take-up would be much slower. If you make it a legal requirement, then the take-up becomes much quicker. So, removing diesel car production by a certain date and forcing the hand of car manufacturers to move to electrical solutions and things like that, it has really transformed that industry by putting a law in place. So it's happened, and I think the same premise can apply to other industries to force change for the positive of everybody.
I agree with that. But what motivates you to keep on pushing, even when systems feel slow or slow to change?
Well, that's good. So you can't rely on legislation, can you? But I think if businesses look at what competitive advantage they can create from being more sustainable, that's absolutely the way to do it. And consumers, we watch with horror, I think, as the different seasons change around the world, at what impacts are happening on a climate level. And yes, people do deny that there is impact, but we can very clearly see that there are various parts of the world that are burning, flooding, and we are facing potentially a catastrophic situation if we don't change things. It's not too late. We've gone past a certain point, but I think this partnership area of saying, look, we can collaborate to create something better. I'm not being idealistic. I'm just saying, just be more thoughtful with your design. It's not rocket science, is it?
I agree with that. Well, looking ahead 10 years from now, what's your bold prediction about sustainability in industry?
That's a very good question. Well, I think it does depend on who's in power. I suppose. Thank goodness the American political system has a 2-term limit to who runs for president. So and the president of the US is entitled to his opinions, but I think he needs to look a little bit wider in his advisory format and just look at the science. But perhaps I think when we look at the evidence that's been placed in front of us from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it's very clear. And this is made up of hundreds of scientists from different backgrounds and different countries. So it's a collaboration of multicultural scientists that all come up with the bottom line equation that we have a lot of challenges and a lot of changing situations, and that's all caused by climate change and the emissions that are put out there. Yes, planet Earth has natural cycles, but I think what we've done is accelerated and as a species become a catalyst for those changes that are happening prematurely and at much higher levels. Yes. And that's essentially what's happened. So we really need to think as consumers about our carbon lifestyle, and do we need to do X, Y, and Z as individuals? And look, it's 1.5 million. Was 8.2 billion people on the planet. It's about 1.5 of them are really, causing the pollution, because we're big advanced economies with lots of consumer behaviour, and we're taking much more carbon than we have the right, or we're expending much more carbon than we have the right to do so compared to other countries. And look, in the UK and the US, does it really matter if small specific islands are flooded because of our consumer behaviour? Well, of course it does, but you don't see it, you don't experience it, it's not your problem, it's not in my backyard. And I think until you're exposed to these situations firsthand, I don't think we're going to change that much. So what do I think it's going to be? I live in hope, okay? We live in hope because we've got children. I've got a 7-year-old daughter.
Yes, indeed.
And, I want to create, my legacy should be that it doesn't damage her future.
Okay.
And, it's so selfish to live in the here and now, isn't it? And do you think in 10 years or 20 years' time, people will look back at our generation and go, what were they doing?
Yes, I agree with that.
They were told about this. What did they do? They did nothing.
Yes, I agree with that. Definitely agree with that. So if someone listening today wanted to start making their business or product more circular, what would be the first steps they should do?
If you're a business, I think firstly it's to, have some purpose about your business. So I think you've got to start somewhere, and that starts in the boardroom, I think. So if your boardroom isn't on board, you're not going to do anything, quite simply. And as an employee, you've got a choice to stay with a business that's going to be unsustainable or join one that can be more sustainable if you have strong feelings in that. If you're a business owner, then you just have to start making someone responsible for the sustainability issues and start minuting it on your business. Nobody's saying that you have to be perfect, and there's a good Voltairean phrase, the French philosopher Voltaire, about don't let perfection get in the way of doing good. I think I've always subscribed to that, because we can't make things perfect immediately, but you can make steps, and lots of tiny steps make big steps. And you can start somewhere in your business. Look at your supply chains. What are they doing? Have you actually measured your carbon footprint, and what are your scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions and things like that? They're small things. Understand what you have, and then understand how you can improve them. And don't, these things can be spread out. They don't have to be done all at once. They don't have to be financially draining on the business. But if you've got to start somewhere, right? And I think the challenge businesses have is becoming, we've seen species on this planet become extinct, such as the dinosaurs. And I think those businesses that aren't on board with sustainability and taking action eventually will become extinct as businesses, because your other stakeholders, the consumers, will be demanding more from the supply chain. So it may not be today, but if we're talking about tomorrow, then making yourself relevant for tomorrow's market is so important.
Yes, indeed. Well, you're leaving an impactful legacy that we should not damage the future. But for our regular viewers, regular people, what's one lasting message you would have for them?
We've just listened to a podcast about sustainability, so what are you going to do different tomorrow would be my question to everybody.
Excellent. Well, this has been another episode of Sustainably Smart Talks. We promise to bring you industry leads, academic researchers and entrepreneurs who are making a change in the forefront. Well, Richard, thank you for your time today.
It's an absolute pleasure. You're going to have to fist bump me now, because yes, I am down with the sustainability kids.
Yes, indeed.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Well, lovely. Appreciate that.